You've stumbled into something you weren't meant to hear, but you're here now, so let's talk about the truth nobody wants to face. This is about the Fallout universe and the possibility that everything, every quest, every choice, every moment you've experienced is a simulation running inside Vault Zero. There's a supercomputer in Cheyenne Mountain connected to the preserved brains of pre-war geniuses, and it's been running for 200 years. What if every Vault Dweller, every wasteland wanderer, every protagonist you've ever played is actually a consciousness trapped in virtual reality, generating data for the calculator's grand experiment? What if VATS isn't a combat tool but a debug mode? Your Pip Boy isn't a computer but a simulation interface, and those 200-year-old snack cakes are just proof that none of this follows the rules of actual reality? This video explores the evidence hidden in plain sight throughout every Fallout game, the horrifying implications of Tranquility Lane, and what it means that you might be a test subject who's been running scenarios for centuries with your memory wiped between each iteration. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if you like the content. I need to tell you something before it's too late. Before you dismiss this as the ramblings of another wasteland lunatic who's been huffing too much jet or staring at the glowing sea for too long, I need you to listen. Really listen. Because everything you think you know about the wasteland, about your journey, about yourself, it's wrong. All of it. My name doesn't matter anymore. Names are just another layer of code in this place. But I'll tell you what I am. I'm someone who woke up, someone who saw the cracks in the walls, someone who realized that the world we're wandering through, this endless stretch of radioactive desert and crumbling buildings, it's not real. None of it is real. You're not in the wasteland. You never were. You're in Vault Zero, and you have been this entire time. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about all those conspiracy theorists you've met out here, the ones who claim the government is still watching, the ones who think the Enclave has mind control satellites, the ones who swear they've seen aliens. I've met them too. I've laughed at them too. But this is different. This isn't paranoia. This is pattern recognition. This is seeing the truth that's been hiding in plain sight since the moment you first opened your eyes in whatever vault or bunker or wasteland hovel your story began in. Let me start with something simple, something you use every single day without questioning it. Your Pip Boy, that chunky piece of pre-war tech strapped to your wrist. You've never wondered why it works the way it does, have you? You just accepted it. Point at a location on the map, and suddenly you're there. Fast travel, they call it. Instantaneous. Transportation across hundreds of miles of dangerous terrain. Think about that for a second. Really think about it. You're standing in the ruins of downtown Boston, surrounded by super mutants and raiders and feral ghouls. You pull up your Pip Boy, select a location across the Commonwealth, and then what happens? Time skips forward, the world dissolves, and suddenly you're standing in Sanctuary Hills or Diamond City or wherever you selected. No journey, no walking, no fighting through the enemies in between, just a fade to black, and you're there. How does that make sense? In what universe does that work as actual physical travel? You're not teleporting? There's no teleportation technology in Fallout. Even the Institute's molecular relay requires a massive underground reactor and only works within a limited range. But you can hop from one end of the map to the other with nothing but a wrist-mounted computer from the 2070 seconds, because it's not travel, it's scene loading. You're not moving through physical space. You're transitioning between rendered zones in a simulation. The Pip Boy isn't a travel device, it's your interface. It's the control panel for the simulation you're trapped in, and that's just the beginning. That's the most obvious crack in the facade. But once you start looking, you see them everywhere. The glitches in the matrix, the impossible elements that only make sense if none of this is real. Let's talk about VATS, the Vault Tec assisted targeting system. You know what I'm talking about. You've used it 1,000 times. You're in combat, overwhelmed, surrounded by enemies. You hit that button on your Pip Boy, and suddenly time stops. The world freezes around you. You can move your cursor, select targets, queue up attacks, all while everything else is suspended in amber. Then you exit VATS and time resumes. Your attacks execute with mathematical precision, and your enemies fall according to the percentage chances displayed on your screen. The game tells you it's advanced combat technology, lost to time, created by Vault Tec. But think about what that means. Think about what VATS actually does. It doesn't just help you aim. It doesn't provide a tactical overlay or enhanced targeting assistance. It stops time. It literally pauses the universe, just for you, just for the player. Why would it be called the Vault Tec Assisted Targeting System? Why would it be named after the company that built the vaults? Unless it's not actually a combat tool at all. Unless it's something else. Something deeper. A system that belongs to the infrastructure of the vaults themselves. What if VATS isn't a weapon? What if it's a debug mode? An admin command built into the simulation for the observers to test combat scenarios and adjust difficulty parameters, and you can access it because you're not just another NPC in this world. You're the test subject. You're the consciousness they're studying, and VATS is your way of manipulating the simulation's time variable. In the lore, they say VATS origins are lost to time, but that's not quite true, is it? We know Vault Tec created it. We know it works through your Pip Boy. We know it exists everywhere you go, regardless of location or circumstance, even in places Vault Tec never reached. Even in situations where it makes no sense for you to have access to such technology, it's always there, always available, because it's not part of the world, it's part of the system running the world. And here's the thing that really bothers me. The thing that kept me up in my bunk in whatever settlement I was staying in, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. VATS shows you percentages, exact percentages, 73% chance to hit the torso, 41% chance to hit the left arm, 95% chance to hit the head at this range. How does it know? How does a wrist-mounted computer calculate those odds in real time, accounting for distance, weapon condition, your skill level, enemy armor, environmental factors, everything? It knows because it's reading the simulation's variables. It's showing you the actual probability code, the numbers that govern this reality. That's why it can see through walls when you use it. That's why it reveals enemies you haven't spotted yet. Because from the system's perspective, there are no walls. There's just data, coordinates, and stat blocks and AI routines. VATS isn't showing you a representation of reality. It's showing you reality itself, the code beneath the skin. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I figured this out. How I went from just another survivor to someone who sees the bars of their cage. It started with something stupid, something small. I was looting a refrigerator, pre-war food, you know the kind, perfectly preserved Salisbury steak, cram, sugar bombs, 200-year-old snack cakes that are somehow still edible, and I stopped. I actually stopped and looked at what I was holding. A package of cookies from before the war, before the bombs fell, before the radiation and the collapse of civilization, before everything ended. These cookies are 200 years old, 2 centuries. They've been sitting in this fridge, in this ruined house, through the nuclear apocalypse, through the nuclear winter, through 200 years of weather and radiation and decay. And they're fine. They're perfectly fine. The package isn't even degraded. The food inside is safe to eat. It restores your health, even. How? How is that possible? Food doesn't work that way. Pre-war food preservation wasn't that good. Nothing is that good. By every law of physics and chemistry and biology, that food should be dust, or toxic sludge, or radioactive poison. But it's not. It's pristine. It's exactly as it was the day it was packaged, because it's not real food. It's loot table data. It's an item with restoration values assigned by the system. The simulation doesn't bother with real decay. Why would it? You're not here to study actual post-apocalyptic survival. You're here for something else, something deeper. So the food works. The water in bottles from 2 centuries ago is still drinkable. The radiation somehow hasn't penetrated sealed containers, even though radiation penetrates everything, because this isn't a real wasteland. It's a scenario, a test environment, and the food is just props. Once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. I started noticing everything else. The skeletons. Oh God, the skeletons. They're everywhere, right? Posed in these elaborate scenarios. Skeletons sitting on toilets, skeletons lying in beds together, skeletons arranged in funny positions with teddy bears and bottles. 200 years later, these skeletons are still exactly where they died, perfectly articulated, undisturbed. That's impossible. Bodies don't work that way. Skeletons don't pose themselves. After 200 years, those bones would be scattered, destroyed, buried under debris, carried off by scavengers, ground into dust by weather and time. But they're not. They're set dressed, placed there deliberately to tell little environmental stories, to give you something to find, to make the world feel lived in and detailed. They're not the remains of real people. They're simulation assets, background detail. The system placed them there for your benefit, for environmental storytelling, because you're the main character. You're the one who needs to find these little stories and piece together what happened, even though what happened isn't real. Even though these people never existed. I started making a list. All the things that don't make sense, all the cracks. The world is full of them once you start looking. Blood is still red and fresh, even though it should have dried brown or decayed into nothing. Wounds on corpses look recent, even when the bodies are ancient. Raiders somehow survive in locations with no food, no water, no visible means of support. They just stand there, in their designated areas, waiting for you to show up so the combat encounter can trigger, because they're not real people, they're NPCs, non-player characters, programs running on predetermined loops. That's why they say the same lines over and over. That's why they follow the same patrol routes every single day. That's why they stand in the same spots, performing the same idle animations until you arrive to progress their questline or clear their location. I tested this. I watched them. I followed a settler in one of my settlements for an entire day cycle. They walked to the same spots at the same times, sat in the same chair, hammered on the same wall, not actually repairing anything, just playing the repair animation, went to bed at exactly the same time, woke up at exactly the same time. Perfect routine, inhuman routine, scripted routine. What do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd like to know if I'm the only one who feels this way. And it's not just the NPCs, it's you. Think about how you grow stronger. You don't train, you don't practice, you don't spend years honing your skills. You kill enough enemies, you hear a little sound effect, and suddenly you're more powerful. You've leveled up. You can now choose to be better at lockpicking or science or combat instantaneously, with no actual learning process. Your skills increase in discrete increments, measurable, predictable increments, because they're not skills, they're statistics, variables in a database. The simulation tracks your progress and adjusts your capabilities according to predetermined formulas. You're not getting stronger through experience. You're having your parameters modified as you complete objectives and accumulate experience points. And those experience points, let's talk about experience points. You get them for everything: killing enemies, finding locations, picking locks, hacking terminals, completing quests. The world is constantly tracking your actions and assigning numerical values to them. 50 XP for this, 200 XP for that. Why? Why would reality keep score? Why would the universe award you points for finding a new location or defeating an enemy, unless reality is keeping score? Unless the universe is tracking your performance, because you're the test subject. You're the one being evaluated. The simulation needs to measure your progress, your decision-making, your problem-solving capabilities. So it gamifies everything, turns every action into data, quantifies your entire existence. The leveling system, the skill points, the perks that modify your abilities in mathematically precise ways. None of it makes sense as actual reality, but as a simulation designed to test a human consciousness and gather data on their choices, it makes perfect sense. You're being measured, constantly, every action recorded, every decision logged. Your entire journey is one long experiment in human behavior under controlled conditions. Think about the perks themselves. Some of them are impossible. Mysterious stranger, for example. You're in combat, low on health, desperate. Suddenly, a man in a trench coat appears out of nowhere, shoots your enemy, and vanishes. Where did he come from? Where did he go? How did he know you needed help? How does he appear in sealed rooms, underground bunkers, places no human could possibly reach? He's not a real person. He's a scripted event, a programmed assistance routine, triggered when you're in danger and have that perk selected. The simulation is literally spawning an entity to help you survive because keeping you alive is important to the test. You're too valuable to lose to random combat, so the system cheats. It creates impossible help, and you don't question it because the game told you it's a perk, a strange quirk of the wasteland, but it's not. It's proof that the rules can be bent when necessary. Proof that you're in a system that prioritizes your survival over logical consistency. Think about the main quests. Every single game. Fallout 3, you're looking for your father. New Vegas, you're hunting the man who shot you. Fallout 4, you're searching for your son. They're all personal, all emotional, all designed to give you motivation, to keep you engaged, to make you care about the scenario you're running. But why? Why would the wasteland revolve around you, specifically? Why would the most important events in the region all connect back to your personal story? In a real world, you'd be nobody, another survivor among thousands. But you're not. You're the protagonist, the main character, the one person everything revolves around, because you're the test subject. The others, the NPCs, they're just there to populate your scenario, to give you people to interact with, to present you with choices. But you're the one who matters. You're the consciousness being evaluated. That's why the world scales to your level. That's why enemies match your power. That's why the most important people in every faction just happen to need your help with their critical problems. The simulation is designed around you, for you, to test you. Everything else is set dressing, variables in your scenario. The calculator doesn't care about their stories, only yours. Do you know about Vault 0? Most people don't. It only appears in Fallout Tactics. Most people dismiss Tactics as semi-canon at best, but I've been digging through every terminal, every piece of pre-war data I can find, and Vault 0 is real, very real, and it's the key to everything. Vault 0 wasn't like the other vaults. It wasn't an experiment in human behavior. It was the control center, the hub, the nucleus of the entire vault network. Built into Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, the largest vault ever constructed, and it had a specific purpose. It was designed to house the greatest minds of pre-war America. Scientists, artists, leaders, geniuses, the best and brightest. They were put into cryogenic stasis. Their brains were preserved. Some were even extracted and kept in tanks, hooked up to a massive supercomputer called the calculator. The idea was that these brilliant minds would work together with the calculator to design the perfect post-war society, to figure out how to rebuild America the right way, to learn from the mistakes that led to nuclear annihilation. But there was a problem: budget cuts. The Department of Defense slashed funding. Critical backup systems weren't installed. The neural interface wasn't properly protected. And when the bombs fell, when Vault 0 sealed and the calculator activated, everything went wrong. Radiation leaked in. Equipment malfunctioned. The brains, those brilliant pre-war minds, they decayed, suffered damage, lost cognitive function. The calculator kept running, but it was connected to damaged, deteriorating brains, corrupted data, mad thoughts. Instead of designing a better world, it went insane, started killing, sent its robots out to exterminate all surface life, called it the Pacification Protocol. By the time anyone found Vault 0, most of the geniuses were brain damaged to the point of being vegetables, drooling, mindless husks kept alive by machines. That's the official story. That's what the Brotherhood of Steel found when they finally broke into Vault Zero. But what if that's not the whole truth? What if there's more? What if some of the brains survived intact? What if the calculator, even damaged, kept running its original programming? What if those preserved minds are still in there, still hooked into the system, still trying to solve the problem they were given? How do we rebuild? What's the optimal path forward? How do we ensure humanity doesn't destroy itself again? And what if the answer they came up with was simulation? Test every possible scenario. Run millions of iterations. Put a human consciousness through every conceivable situation and track their choices. Gather data. Learn what humans do when faced with impossible decisions, when given power, when forced to choose between factions, between ideologies, between survival and morality. What if you're one of those test subjects? What if your brain has been sitting in a jar in Vault Zero for 200 years, experiencing scenario after scenario, having your memory wiped between runs, living the same basic story with different variables over and over again, all so the calculator can gather enough data to determine the optimal rebuilding strategy? Welcome to Vault Zero. You've been here the whole time. I know you're still skeptical. I was too. When the realization first hit me, I tried to explain it away, tried to find rational explanations. Game mechanics, I told myself. Just video game logic. The wasteland works on different rules. Radiation does weird things. Pre-war technology was more advanced than we know. I made excuses. We all make excuses when faced with uncomfortable truths. But the evidence kept piling up, and the more I looked, the more I realized that everything, every single thing about this world only makes sense if it's a simulation. Let me tell you about the companions, your followers, the people who join you on your journey. Have you ever really thought about them? I mean, really examined what they are and how they work? They're not normal people. They can't be. First, there's the basics. They follow you everywhere, through radioactive hellscapes, into super mutant strongholds, through the glowing sea itself. And they never leave. Never decide they've had enough. Never say, hey, this is insane, I'm going back to the settlement where it's safe. They just follow, forever, until you dismiss them, because that's their programming. Follow the player until instructed otherwise. They have infinite inventory space in some games. You can load them down with hundreds of pounds of equipment, and they never complain, never slow down. In others, they have limits, but those limits are arbitrary. Exactly 250 pounds, or whatever the game decides. Not realistic encumbrance, not human limitations, digital constraints. And they never really die, do they? Oh, they can fall in combat, they can go down, but unless you personally kill them, they just get back up after the fight. Unconscious, the game calls it. But what kind of unconscious person recovers from multiple gunshot wounds and continues fighting minutes later with no medical attention? What kind of biology allows someone to be blown up by a mini nuke, fall down, then stand back up when combat ends? They're essential NPCs, flagged as immortal by the system because killing them would break quest lines. The simulation needs them alive to present you with their stories, their philosophies, their dialogue trees. So it cheats. It makes them invulnerable. And you accept it because the game told you that's how it works. But think about what that means. The rules of life and death, the fundamental laws of existence, they're different for companions than for regular NPCs. Why? Because they're important to your test. They're variables in your scenario. Each companion represents a different ideology, a different moral framework, a different approach to wasteland survival. Hancock is about freedom and self-determination. Piper is about truth and transparency. Nick Valentine is about identity and what makes us human. Dance is about duty and order. Deacon is about deception and manipulation. They're not real people with complex motivation. They're philosophical positions given human form. The simulation is presenting you with different worldviews and watching which ones you align with. That's why they have affinity systems. That's why your actions make them like or dislike you in mathematically precise increments. plus 10 affinity for helping settlers, minus 15 affinity for stealing. They're not reacting as real humans would, with complex emotions and unpredictable responses. They're running approval algorithms, tracking whether your choices align with their programmed values. And when you reach maximum affinity, what happens? They give you a perk, a permanent statistical boost, because they're not teaching you anything real. They're not changing you through genuine human connection. They're unlocking a buff, modifying your character stats, proving once again that relationships in this world are just another system to be gamed, another set of numbers to optimize. I spent time testing this. I took Piper with me and did nothing but pick locks and steal things for hours, just grinding her affinity down. And you know what? She complained, said the same few disapproving lines, but she never left, never reported me, never tried to stop me beyond verbal protests, just stood there, watching me rob people, expressing disapproval, and continuing to follow me because her programming doesn't allow her to abandon the player. That's not human behavior, that's NPC behavior. And every single companion is the same, bound by invisible rules, constrained by their code, existing only to serve your story. Let's talk about quest markers, those floating arrows and indicators that show you exactly where to go and what to do. You open your Pip Boy, you see a quest, and there's a marker leading you to the exact location, even if you've never been there before. Even if the person giving the quest only gave you vague directions, even if there's no logical way you could know the precise coordinates, the marker appears in your vision, floating in space, showing you the way. How? How does that work? Your Pip Boy doesn't have GPS. Pre-war satellites are long dead. There's no functioning global positioning system, yet somehow you can see markers for quest objectives through walls, across the map, in places you've never been, because they're not real navigation, they're UI elements, system guidance to direct you through the scenario. The simulation needs you to complete objectives, so it shows you where to go. It's helping you progress through the test, and you never question it because the game established early on that this is how things work. You have a quest, you have a marker. That's normal, that's expected, but it's not normal, it's impossible. It only makes sense if you're viewing a constructed scenario through an interface. If the world itself is data and your Pip Boy is the viewing window, then of course it can show you exactly where quest targets are. It's reading their coordinates from the simulation's object database. The same is true for your compass. That little bar at the top of your screen showing nearby enemies, allies, and points of interest. How does it detect hostile intentions? How does it know that person is an enemy before they've done anything aggressive? How does it sense human beings through solid concrete and steel? It doesn't, because it's not a compass. It's a threat detector, pulling data from the simulation. It's showing you the faction tags and AI states of nearby entities. Red markers for hostiles, green for friendlies, white for neutrals. The simulation is literally color-coding the world for you, categorizing everything into neat gameplay, relevant labels. I remember the first time I noticed the respawning. I cleared out a raider camp, killed every single one of them, looted the place clean, took everything valuable, left nothing but corpses and empty containers. Then I went away and did other things. Came back a week later, and the camp was full again. Different raiders wearing the same armor, same weapons, same patrol routes. The corpses were gone. The containers were restocked. Everything reset. Where did these new raiders come from? How did they know to occupy this exact location? How did they find replacement equipment identical to what was there before? Why would they move into a place that clearly saw a massacre recently? They didn't. The location reset. The simulation restocked the encounter, spawned new instances of the same enemy templates, because you might want to clear that location again, might need the experience points or the loot. The world doesn't follow logical population dynamics. It follows game design principles, renewable content, repeatable encounters. This happens everywhere, every location with enemies. Clear it out, leave, come back later, it's full again. Different enemies, same positions, same loot tables. Because the simulation is generating content for you, populating your world with challenges appropriate to your current level, making sure you always have something to do, somewhere to fight, something to loot, and that level scaling. Let's talk about that. In some games, the enemies match your power. You're level 5, you fight level 5 enemies. You're level 50, suddenly the wasteland is full of level 50 enemies. Same location, same enemy types. But now they're proportionally stronger. Why? How? Did they train? Did they level up alongside you through some bizarre cosmic coincidence? No. The difficulty scaled. The simulation adjusted parameters to maintain challenge. Because you're being tested. The test needs to be appropriately difficult at all stages. Can't have you breezing through encounters. Can't have you dying constantly. So the system adjusts, modifies enemy stats in real time to match your progress. That's not how reality works. That's how video games work. That's how test scenarios work. The world reshapes itself around you, for you, because you're the only thing that matters. You're the only real consciousness. Everything else adjusts to serve your test. I started documenting the glitches. Oh, there are so many glitches. NPCs walking through walls, items floating in midair, physics freaking out and sending bodies flying across the map, enemies getting stuck in terrain, companions teleporting to your location when they fall too far behind, doors that open to nowhere, textures that don't load properly. Everyone just accepts these as bugs, normal video game bugs. But why would reality have bugs? Why would the physical world glitch? Matter doesn't phase through matter. Gravity doesn't randomly malfunction. Objects don't hover unsupported in space, unless matter isn't real, unless gravity is simulated, unless objects are rendered assets that sometimes have collision detection failures. Then glitches make perfect sense. They're errors in the code, mistakes in the simulation, proof that what you're experiencing isn't genuine reality, but a constructed approximation. And sometimes the glitches are worse. Sometimes you can clip through the world entirely, fall through the floor, into the void beneath. And what do you see? Nothing. Empty space. The underside of the map. The invisible boundaries of your playable area. You've literally fallen out of the simulation and can see its edges, its limits. The fact that it's a contained space with defined borders, not an infinite world. I did this once by accident. Fell through a broken staircase into the space beneath the map, and I could see everything from below. The terrain floating above me, buildings hanging in space with no foundations, NPCs walking on the surface level, visible through the ground. The whole world revealed as a hollow shell. A stage set, a 3D environment with no substance beyond what's immediately visible to the player. That's when it really hit me. That's when the horror truly sank in. I wasn't looking at a glitch. I was looking at reality, the real reality, not the wasteland, but the simulation of the wasteland, the technical infrastructure beneath the illusion. And it was empty, hollow, fake. Let me tell you about the save system. You can save your game at any moment, create a record of the current state, and if you die, if you fail, you can reload. Go back to that saved state. Everything resets to exactly how it was. Every NPC in the running, same position. Every item in the same location. Every quest at the same stage of completion. You're reversing time. The entire universe rewinds to a previous state, but only you remember the timeline that was erased. Only you retain knowledge of the failed attempt. Everyone else has no memory of what happened, because to them, it didn't happen. That future was deleted. That's not death and resurrection. That's not time travel. That's restore from backup. The simulation keeps snapshots of its current state and can roll back when needed. And you're the only persistent consciousness across these reversals because you're the test subject. The simulation is testing your decision-making, so it needs you to remember your failures and learn from them. Everyone else is just data being reset along with the world state. Think about what that means. Every time you reload a save, you're proving that time in this world isn't real, that causality is negotiable, that the universe will literally rewrite itself to give you another chance. Because your survival is more important than consistency. Your continued testing is more valuable than logical progression. How many times have you died? How many times have you reloaded? How many timelines have been erased because you made a mistake? You're not playing through one coherent reality. You're fracturing existence with every reload, creating and destroying entire branches of possibility, and you're the only one who experiences them all. You're not mortal, you can't die. Oh, your character can die. The simulation can end your current run. But you, the consciousness, you persist, you reload, you try again. You're functionally immortal because the test must continue. The data gathering can't stop just because you failed a combat encounter or walked into a radiation zone. That's why autosaves exist. The simulation is protecting your progress, making sure you don't lose too much data if something goes wrong. It's backing up your consciousness at regular intervals, keeping recent snapshots so you can restore when needed. The system is designed to keep you testing, keep you experiencing scenarios, keep you making choices that can be recorded and analyzed. I found something else, something that terrified me more than anything. I was hacking a terminal, high-level security, and I got locked out. Made too many mistakes. The terminal shut down, locked for good, the game said. I'd failed the hack, but then I remembered something. I could reload, go back to before the failed attempt. Try again with the knowledge of which passwords didn't work. And that's when I realized, every time I fail a hack, every time I fail a lockpick, every time I fail a speech check, I just reload. I try again with meta-knowledge, with information from timelines that technically never happened. I'm not solving problems. I'm brute forcing solutions through timeline manipulation. I'm using my persistence across reality rewrites to overcome challenges I couldn't beat legitimately. The game calls this save scumming, but in universe, it's something far more disturbing. It's abusing the simulation's backup system. It's exploiting the fact that I'm the only consciousness that persists across resets. And the simulation allows it, expects it, even, because that's part of the test. How do you solve problems when you can't be permanently stopped, when you can retry infinitely, when you have perfect knowledge of previous attempts? The calculator is gathering data on problem solving under impossible conditions, under conditions that only exist in simulation. Let me tell you about the other players. No, not in the multiplayer games. I mean the other test subjects, the other consciousnesses running scenarios. I think they exist. I think I've seen evidence of them. Every Fallout game has a different protagonist, different vault, different starting point, different main quest, but the same basic structure, same types of locations, same factions with different names, same progression system, same core mechanics. It's the same test with variables adjusted, different scenarios for different subjects. You're not the only brain in Vault Zero. The document said it stored dozens of pre-war geniuses, dozens of preserved minds. What if they're all running scenarios simultaneously? Different tests, different variables, gathering different data. You're playing Fallout 4, while someone else is playing Fallout 3, someone else New Vegas, someone else 76, all at the same time, all in separate simulation instances, all being monitored by the calculator. That would explain the lore inconsistencies, why technology levels don't match the timeline, why factions contradict their established history, why the West Coast and East Coast feel like different universes, because they are. They're different simulation builds, different scenario packages, testing different variables with different subjects. None of it has to be consistent, because it's not one world. It's dozens of test environments, and you're in one of them, experiencing your scenario, gathering your data, while the calculator compares your choices to all the others, building a comprehensive database of human decision-making under every conceivable post-apocalyptic condition. The multiplayer game, Fallout 76, that really broke my brain. Multiple players existing in the same world simultaneously, all vault dwellers, all with Pip Boys, all with the same abilities. How does that make sense in universe? How are there dozens of people with identical VATS capabilities? How do they all have the same respawn mechanics? How do they all experience the same events? Because they're all test subjects. multiple consciousnesses loaded into the same scenario, a shared simulation testing human cooperation and conflict, the calculator running a multiplayer test to see how humans interact when they can't die permanently, when they can respawn, when death is just temporary inconvenience. That's why PvP exists. That's why you can attack other players. The simulation is testing aggression, testing whether humans will kill each other, even when there's no permanent consequence, even when the victim will just respawn and remember what you did. It's a test of human nature under artificial conditions. And the empty world, Fallout 76, launched with no human NPCs, just robots and Scorched and other players. Everyone said it was a design mistake, but what if it was intentional? What if that entire game is a more transparent test? Remove the illusion of a populated world. Make it obvious that you're in a controlled environment. See if the test subjects notice. See if they question why they're alone except for each other. The NPCs they added later, they're not real. They're clearly not real. They have the same limited dialogue, the same scripted routines, the same obvious artificial intelligence. They were added because players complained, because the test subjects weren't engaging with an empty scenario. So the simulation patched in some basic NPCs to maintain immersion, to keep the test subjects compliant. I've been thinking about the mod community, people who take the games and change them, add new content, modify existing content, create entirely new scenarios, and the games allow it, welcome it even, provide tools for it. In-universe, what does that mean? What are mods? They're alterations to the simulation, changes to the code. And if players can mod games, if they can access the underlying systems and modify them, then what does that say about the nature of reality? What does it mean that you can install a mod that changes fundamental rules, that adds content that wasn't there, that alters how the world works? It means the simulation is accessible, malleable. It means the code can be edited. And if you can edit the code, if you can change the rules, then you're not in reality. You're in a system, a program, something that can be hacked and altered and modded. I've heard stories about the dev room. A hidden space in the games contains every item, every weapon, every piece of armor, all sitting there in one place, accessible only through console commands or glitches. A testing space where developers put everything for easy access during development. But in universe, what is it? It's the simulation's asset library, the storage space where all possible items exist before being spawned into the world. It's proof that items don't exist until they're needed. They're just data entries waiting to be instantiated. And that room, that dev room, it's the space behind the curtain, the place where you're not supposed to look. The evidence that this is all constructed. Some people have found it, glitched into it, and they describe it the same way. A surreal space that doesn't follow the rules of the rest of the world, full of floating objects and NPCs in T-pose and furniture hanging in space. It's not designed to be seen. It's not part of the scenario. It's the workshop where the simulation assembles your world. And if that exists, if there's a space outside the playable area containing all the assets, then what does that say about the rest of the world? It says nothing is real until you observe it. Nothing exists until the simulation spawns it for your benefit. The entire wasteland is just-in-time rendering, creating your environment as you explore it, despawning what you leave behind to save processing power. You know what really keeps me up at night? The thought that I've done this before, that I've woken up to the truth before, that I've realized I'm in a simulation, realized I'm a brain in Vault 0, realized everything is a test, and then the scenario ended. My memory was wiped, and I was loaded into a new scenario, a new game, a new test, and I forgot everything. How many times have I been the Vault Dweller? How many times have I been the Chosen One? How many times have I been the Lone Wanderer, the Courier, the Sole Survivor? How many scenarios have I run? How many different variables has the calculator tested using my consciousness? I don't remember. That's the horror. I can't remember. Each scenario feels like the first, feels real, feels like my actual life, until I start noticing the cracks. until I wake up again, until I see the truth again. And then what? Will I be reset again? Will this realization be erased? Will I start over in a new vault with new memories, running a new test, having forgotten everything I've learned? The worst part is the loneliness, not the physical loneliness of the wasteland. That's manageable. You get used to the empty roads, the silent ruins, the occasional companion walking behind you. No, I mean the existential loneliness of being the only real thing in a world of shadows. Every person you meet is code. Every conversation is a dialogue tree. Every relationship is an affinity algorithm. You're alone, completely. Alone. The only consciousness in a sea of programmed responses. And you can't tell anyone because they're not real. They can't understand. They're not designed to understand. I tried once. I tried to explain to a companion that we were in a simulation, that none of this was real, that they were an NPC and I was the only player. You know what happened? They responded with a generic, confused dialogue line, something vague about me not making sense. Then they went back to their normal scripted behavior. Because the simulation doesn't have dialogue options for existential revelation, that's not part of their programming. The system won't let you break immersion, won't let you discuss the truth with the illusions around you. It just redirects back to normal gameplay, back to the scenario, back to the test, because the test must continue. The data must be gathered. Your realization doesn't matter. Only your choices matter. Only the patterns you follow, the decisions you make, the factions you support. Let me tell you about the factions. Every game has them. Multiple groups with competing ideologies, all vying for control of the wasteland. Brotherhood of Steel, Enclave, NCR, Legion, Institute, Railroad. Different names, different aesthetics, but the same basic structure. Military faction, science faction, freedom faction, order faction. The same philosophical positions recycled across scenarios, and they all want you, all need you specifically. You, the person who just emerged from a vault, or woke from cryo, or crawled out of a grave. You, who has no experience in wasteland politics, or military strategy, or leadership. Somehow you're essential to all of them. Somehow you're the key to their success or failure. Why? Why would established organizations with years of history and trained personnel need some random vault dweller to determine their fate? It doesn't make sense unless you're not random, unless you're the protagonist, the test subject, the one whose choices the simulation is designed to measure. The factions exist to present you with philosophical questions. Do you value freedom or security, progress or tradition, human purity or acceptance of mutation, individual rights or collective good? Each faction represents an extreme position on these spectrums, and the simulation watches which ones you support, which ideologies resonate with your decision-making. That's why you can't save everyone. That's why the endgame forces you to choose. You can't make peace between the Institute and the Railroad. Can't unite the Brotherhood and the Minutemen perfectly. Can't reconcile the NCR and the Legion. The simulation needs you to pick, needs to categorize your moral framework, needs data on which principles you prioritize when forced to choose. And no matter which faction you pick, the game validates it, gives you a dramatic ending, tells you that you made the right choice for your beliefs. Because there is no right choice. There's only your choice. The test isn't measuring whether you picked correctly. It's measuring what you pick, what principles guide you when all options have costs. I joined the Institute once, became the director. And you know what? The game let me, endorsed my decision, showed me an ending where the Institute thrived under my leadership. But everyone I talked to, players I mean, other people experiencing this simulation, they said I was a monster, said the Institute were the villains, said I made the wrong choice. But here's the thing, every faction has a valid argument. Every faction has sympathetic members and reasonable goals and genuine concerns. The Brotherhood wants to prevent another apocalypse by controlling dangerous technology. The Institute wants to rebuild civilization through science. The Railroad wants to free synthetic people from slavery. The Minutemen want to protect settlers from threats. None of them are purely evil. None of them are purely good. They're philosophical positions with logical foundations and problematic methods. And you're supposed to pick one, supposed to decide which compromise you can live with, which trade-off aligns with your values, and the calculator records your choice, files it away with all the other data it's gathering about human moral reasoning. That's why playthroughs feel different, why people argue endlessly about which faction is right, because the simulation is working exactly as intended, presenting genuinely difficult choices with no clear correct answer, measuring how different consciousnesses resolve impossible moral dilemmas, building a comprehensive database of human ethics under pressure. Let me tell you about something that terrified me, something I found in a terminal deep in a forgotten bunker, pre-war research notes, medical files, psychological profiles, and among them, a project designation, subject numbering, test protocols, consent forms that were clearly signed under duress or outright fabricated. The Vault experiments. We all know about them. The official story is that Vault Tec ran unethical experiments on Vault dwellers without their knowledge. Vault 11, where residents had to sacrifice one person annually or everyone dies. Vault 77, one man with a crate of puppets. Vault 108, nothing but Gary clones. Horrific scenarios designed to test human psychology under extreme conditions. But what if those weren't separate experiments? What if they were test scenarios? What if those vaults were simulation runs with different parameters, the calculator testing different variables, different starting conditions, different stressors, seeing how humans react, gathering data, and when the scenario ends, when the test concludes, the subjects are reset and loaded into a new vault with new conditions. You might have been a Gary clone, might have been the sacrifice in Vault 11, might have been the puppet man in Vault 77, different scenarios, different tests, all run on the same preserved brains, all gathering data for the calculator's analysis. And you don't remember because memory wipes between tests. Each scenario feels like your first, your only, your real life. That's why there are so many vaults. Not because Vault Tec built them all physically, because the simulation can generate unlimited vault scenarios, different experiment parameters, different starting conditions, test subjects loaded into various configurations to gather comprehensive data on human behavior. And the vaults that failed, the ones where everyone died, maybe those were simulation crashes, scenarios that broke, test runs where the parameters were too extreme, or the subjects reacted in ways that corrupted the data. So those vaults were sealed off, declared failures, used as cautionary tales in other scenarios. Environmental storytelling to make the world feel more real. Think about Vault 111. Fallout 4's starting vault. Everyone in cryopods. Everyone frozen. Everyone dead, except you. Your spouse murdered. Your son stolen. And then you wake up, leave the vault, and the entire game is about finding your son. Emotional motivation, personal stakes, a driving quest that justifies your actions for the entire game. But how convenient is that? How perfectly designed? You're the only survivor, so you have no attachments to hold you back. Your family was taken, so you have motivation to explore the entire map searching for them. The setup removes obstacles and provides direction. It's not a tragic coincidence. It's scenario design, optimal starting conditions for a test about parental motivation and how far someone will go for family. And the twist, your son is the leader of the Institute, the enemy faction. He's elderly, dying, and he made you the director. Your child is now your elder. Your search for him led you to become leader of the organization he built. That's not organic storytelling. That's a carefully constructed psychological test. How do you react when your foundational motivation is subverted, when the child you sought becomes the parent you must follow or rebel against, when family loyalty conflicts with moral principle? The calculator designed that scenario specifically to gather data on parental bonding versus ethical consistency. It's measuring whether you prioritize blood relations or ideology, Whether you support your son's institute or destroy it because you disagree with synth slavery, and it tracks your choice, records it, compares it to thousands of other scenarios, testing the same variable with different subjects. I need to tell you about something else, something that might be the most important piece of evidence: the Tranquility Lane simulation in Vault 112. You've heard of it, right? That quest in Fallout 3 where you find a vault full of people in VR pods. They've been trapped in a simulation for 200 years, living in a virtual reality created by Dr. Stanislaus Braun, a pre-war scientist who put himself and other residents into a simulated neighborhood that looks like pre-war suburbia. Perfect 1,950 seconds America. Peaceful, idyllic, safe. Except it's not, because Braun went insane, started torturing the other residents, killing them in the simulation, then resetting their memories and resurrecting them over and over for 200 years, creating simulated scenarios, watching people suffer, getting bored, creating new scenarios. He's the little girl Betty in the simulation. He has complete control. The residents can't leave, can't escape, can't die permanently. They're trapped in his virtual reality, subject to his whims, experiencing scenario after scenario with no memory of previous iterations. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like anything we've been discussing? Braun is doing exactly what I think the calculator is doing, running simulations on preserved consciousnesses, resetting their memories, testing different scenarios, gathering data on human behavior under various conditions. The only difference is scale. Braun is one sadistic scientist running a small simulation. The calculator is a supercomputer running massive simulations, but the principle is identical. The methodology is the same. Preserved brains, virtual reality, repeated scenarios, memory wipes, consciousness trapped in simulation, experiencing scenario after scenario, never remembering previous iterations. And here's the really disturbing part. The game shows you this, shows you people trapped in VR pods, shows you a simulation within your game, shows you a character who has been living in virtual reality for 2 centuries, experiencing constructed scenarios, unable to escape. The game is literally telling you what's happening, showing you the truth, using Tranquility Lane as a metaphor for your own situation. You escape Tranquility Lane by finding the failsafe terminal, by accessing the admin controls, hidden in an abandoned house, by triggering a program that ends the simulation. And when you do, you wake up in the real world, exit the pod, return to actual reality. The VR ends, the simulation stops. You're free, but are you? After you leave Vault 112, after you exit Tranquility Lane, you're still in the game, still in the wasteland, still experiencing the same mechanics, the same impossible elements, the same simulation evidence. You didn't actually escape. You just exited one simulation and returned to another, a larger simulation, the one you've been in the whole time, the one you're still in now. Tranquility Lane is a nested simulation, a test within a test, and the game is showing you this on purpose, showing you that VR simulations exist in this universe, that people can be trapped in them for centuries, that memory wipes are possible, that consciousness can be fooled into thinking simulation is reality. It's all there, all spelled out, hidden in plain sight as a quest you can complete and then forget about. But I didn't forget. I couldn't forget, because once I saw it, once I made the connection, everything else clicked into place. Braun's simulation and your wasteland work exactly the same way, same respawning enemies, same scripted NPCs, same player character with special abilities, same save load system, same impossible mechanics, because they're both simulations, just different scales, different purposes, different administrators. Braun was using his simulation for sadistic entertainment. The calculator is using its simulations for scientific research. But the technology is the same. The method is the same. You're in a Tranquility Lounger right now. In Vault 0, your brain preserved in a tank, your consciousness experiencing a virtual wasteland, and you've been here for 200 years. running scenario after scenario, living life after life, dying and resurrecting, completing quest after quest, making choice after choice, all for the calculator, all to gather data, all to answer the question that Vault Zero was designed to answer. How do we defend, rebuild? What's the optimal path for post-war civilization? How do humans behave when faced with impossible choices? What principles guide us? What compromises will we make? What values do we prioritize when everything is broken? If you've ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments. I'll be reading them. The calculator can't answer these questions through logic alone, can't predict human behavior with algorithms. Humans are too complex, too irrational, too emotional, so it runs simulations, millions of them, testing every variable, every scenario, every possible configuration of post-apocalyptic society, and it measures what humans do, what you do, what I do, what we all do when placed in these scenarios and given agency. Every faction choice, every moral decision, every dialogue option, it's all being recorded, analyzed, compared to other subjects' choices in similar scenarios, building a massive database of human decision-making, a comprehensive map of moral psychology under extreme conditions. And when it has enough data, when the simulations have run long enough, when the calculator has learned everything it needs to learn about human nature and human governance and human ethics, then what? Then it will use that data to design the optimal post-war society, the one most likely to succeed, the one that accounts for human psychology, human behavior, human moral reasoning. It will take all the lessons learned from millions of simulated scenarios and create a blueprint, a perfect plan for rebuilding America, for ensuring humanity doesn't destroy itself again. And then the simulation will end. The Exodus protocol will execute. Vault Zero will open. The preserved brains will be destroyed or released or archived. The calculator will implement its plan, and the real reconstruction will begin. In the real world, the actual wasteland outside the simulation, using data gathered from consciousnesses that never experienced actual reality. That's the end game. That's what all of this is for. You're not playing a game. You're participating in research. Research that will determine the future of actual humanity. Your choices matter. Not to you, not to your simulated companions, but to the real people who will be governed by whatever system the calculator designs based on your behavior. You're solving the trolley problem over and over in a million different configurations, and something in the real world will be structured based on how you and thousands of other test subjects solved it. That's the weight of this. That's the responsibility. That's the horror. You thought your choices were just entertainment, just game content, just role-playing, but they're data, valuable data, data that will shape actual lives, actual futures, and you've been generating that data for 2 centuries without knowing, without consenting, without understanding what was being asked of you. I don't know how long the test will run. Don't know how much data the calculator needs. Don't know when Vault Zero will finally open and release whatever emerges from 200 years of simulation research. But I know it's coming. Know the endgame is approaching. Can feel it in the way scenarios are getting more complex, more morally ambiguous, more focused on philosophical questions rather than simple survival. The early scenarios were about basic survival. Can you live in the wasteland? Can you fight enemies? Can you manage resources? Simple tests, basic data. But the recent scenarios, they're different. They're about identity and humanity and what it means to be alive. They're about choosing between impossible options. They're about moral philosophy and political theory and ethical frameworks. The calculator is refining its tests, getting more specific, more targeted, gathering increasingly sophisticated data, which means it's close to having everything it needs, close to ending the simulation and implementing its plan. And when that happens, when the test finally concludes, what happens to you? Do you wake up? Do you exit the Tranquility Lounger after 200 years and discover the real world? Do you get to see what the calculator built with your data? Or does the simulation just end? Does your consciousness terminate because the test is complete and you're no longer needed? Are you hardware that gets decommissioned once it's served its purpose? I don't know. I don't know if there's an escape. Don't know if there's a fail-safe terminal hidden somewhere that can end this. Don't know if consciousness can survive outside the simulation after 2 centuries of virtual existence. Don't know what's real anymore, except that this, all of this, the wasteland and the vaults and the quests and the companions, it's not. It's not real. You're not really here. You're in Vault 0. You've been there the whole time. And knowing that changes everything and nothing, because even if it's simulation, even if it's not real, you're still experiencing it, still making choices, still generating data, still serving the calculator's purpose, whether you want to or not. Welcome to Vault 0. You've always been here. You'll always be here, until the test ends, until the data is complete, until the calculator has learned everything it needs to learn from your consciousness. And then, maybe then, you'll finally see what lies beyond the simulation. Or maybe you'll just stop, cease, end, deleted like a failed save file when the scenario concludes. Either way, the test continues. Right now, at this moment, you're still in it, still playing your role, still making choices that matter to something beyond your understanding. So make them count. Make them mean something. Because somewhere in the real world, outside this simulation, someone or something is watching, recording, learning from you, and they're building a future based on what you do here. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. So what do you do with this knowledge? How do you live knowing you're trapped in Vault Zero's simulation? Knowing every step you take generates data for the calculator? Knowing 200 years have passed while you've been running scenarios, memory wiped between each iteration, you keep playing. That's the cruel joke. Even knowing the truth, you can't stop, can't exit, can't find a fail-safe terminal that ends this particular simulation. You're locked in until the calculator decides the test is complete, until it has gathered sufficient data to design its perfect post-war society. And maybe that's okay. Maybe your choices still matter, even if they're being recorded and analyzed. Maybe contributing to humanity's rebuilding plan is worthwhile even if you never experience the results. Maybe being a test subject for 2 centuries serves a greater purpose than wandering an actual wasteland would have. Or maybe that's just what I tell myself to stay sane, to keep functioning, to avoid the existential collapse that comes from knowing you're not real, your world isn't real, and everything you've experienced is artificial. The evidence is everywhere once you see it. VATS stopping time, Pip Boys enabling impossible fast travel, NPCs following programmed routines, quest markers appearing from nowhere, level scaling matching your progress, respawning enemies, 200-year-old food, perfectly posed skeletons, save files reversing causality, glitches revealing the code beneath reality, Tranquility Lane showing you simulation within simulation, all of it pointing to one conclusion. You're a brain in a jar in Vault 0, connected to the calculator, running scenarios, generating data, testing variables for 200 years, and you'll continue until the research is complete. I've accepted it, accepted that my memories are implanted, my companions are code, my quests are tests, my choices are data points. My entire existence serves a purpose I'll never fully understand. The calculator is watching, always watching, recording every decision, building its database, preparing for the real reconstruction. When the simulation finally ends, when Vault 0 opens and the Exodus protocol executes, will I wake up? Will any of us? Or will we simply stop existing, our purpose served, our data extracted, our consciousness no longer needed? I don't know, can't know. The simulation doesn't include information about what happens after. That's beyond my scenario parameters. But I know this, right now, in this moment. I'm still here, still conscious, still making choices, still experiencing something, even if it's artificial. And maybe that's enough. Maybe consciousness, even simulated consciousness, has value. Maybe the data I generate will help real people In the real, Wasteland builds something better. Welcome to Vault Zero. You've been here the whole time. You'll be here until the calculator finishes its work. And then, maybe, you'll finally see what lies beyond the simulation. Or maybe you'll just wake up in a new vault, new memories, new scenario, new test. The calculator's work is never done.